Okay, hi there, everybody, and welcome to this, which is the second session of the Careering Ahead season for women in racing. In the absence of being able to hold any events live in person, we decided to conduct a series of interviews with some brilliant women from in the racing industry. And this evening, I am very, very happy to welcome Vanessa Ryle. She'll be really familiar to loads of you. And she's just such a joyful person to chat to. So I know we're going to have a good laugh and lots of fun this evening. A few people told me off for last time not introducing myself. So hi everyone, I'm Naomi. I'm a vet for the BHA and the treasure of women in racing. I also produce podcasts as a side hustle. And so I've had the wonderful job of conducting these interviews. This is live, but it is also being recorded. So if there is anyone that you know who isn't able to make it tonight, then do spread the word around that this chat will be on the Women in Racing website within the next few days. If you missed the first one of these in our series, which was with Anna Marie Phelps, the chair of the BHA, that one is up and is available to watch. She was a really brilliant, really candid interviewee who spoke really honestly and openly about her career in sport so far. And that is definitely a brilliant watch back. She was a real pleasure to chat to. But tonight, as I said, we have got Vanessa here. And she'll be, as I said, familiar to loads of you. She is a presenter and producer on At the Races. She does loads of freelance stuff with Tattersalls and GBRI and Gatepost. She writes a bit. She's absolutely fantastic on the television. And she's just a really, really lovely person to be around. So we're going to be talking to her about her career this evening. And I just wanted to start, Vanessa, by talking about your early days, because you said a few times in the media that your parents are both in the industry, and your mum was described in The Guardian, which was a phrase I adored, of being the dame of PR, which I just thought was so nice. Like, everyone should aspire to be a dame of their industry. And what did she instill in you when you were growing up about work ethics and your kind of values around work?
Well, both my parents work in media, and both of them have had like completely different careers. My mum was with one company; she was with ITV for 25 years in the end. So she was just on their career path, and she ended up as head of media and PR for them, which was pretty cool. And then my dad has sort of flipped around, done lots of different things, lots of freelance stuff, and now he produces documentary films. And both of them, just from a very early age, instilled in me that you only get out of life what you put in. And it was something that obviously when you're a teenager, it kind of goes a bit over your head. But I think you probably all have a bit of a light bulb moment where you realize that that is actually factually correct. You'll only ever get out what you put in. And both of them are case in point of that. My mum specifically, she just worked incredibly hard and got a long way as a result. And obviously it's a bit of a cliche and you hear it all the time, but the older I get, I'm not sure I'm getting any wiser, but those like early lessons definitely are sort of imprinted in my brain, and I think about them more and more now. So yeah, that's probably what they instilled in me from a very early age.
And your mom's obviously had, as you said, like a super successful career. Did she, was she kind of busy with her career? Like, how did she balance working and motherhood when you were little?
Yeah, she'd probably say not that well. I don't think she is the best mum around. I know we all
Oh.
say that, but it's just very true. She's a complete inspiration because, like I say, she worked incredibly hard and she came from nothing. She
Mm.
was a stable jockey for Harvey Smith,
Wow.
and she worked riding and mucking out for him until her early 20s, and she had no education or anything. Yeah, she went to school, left after her GCSEs, I think, which is when I left school as well. And she was very similar to me. She had no further education, and then she went on a secretarial course in Leeds because she realised that she probably didn't have the nerve to be an international show jumper like she thought she could be. And so she went on a secretarial course and she got a job at Yorkshire Television at the time, just typing, I guess. And she climbed up from there. But as a result, growing up, she was just always incredibly busy. You know, she was glued to her phone, she was glued to her BlackBerry. I don't remember holidays without her having to take work phone calls. And I'm not saying that that's the right way it should be. I'm sure there's probably a better balance, but it was all the time. You know, her career was what she was most proud of, and as a result, she was never going to let that slip. And so, yeah, she, and very much so, my mum ended up having to work in London, obviously, most of the time, and my dad as well. So they sort of did 3 nights each in London a week and were back and forward. And that was just how I grew up. You know, they were just always working very hard. And stuff that they did then has definitely helped me think, well, has sort of molded my normal now, because they used to commute back and forward from London, sometimes daily, like I say, sometimes 3 nights at a time, just whatever, for whatever reason. And now, you know, I don't think twice about driving 3 hours up the motorway to do an interview, because that's what I was brought up with. Yeah. So it all comes back to how you started, I suppose, your early life. But yeah, neither of them very well educated, and both of them sort of went down their own roads and got there in the end, just through different ways. And I guess that's probably what I've done as well.
You mentioned there that you left school after your GCSEs, and I read that you're actually qualified childcare practitioner and you wanted to be a nanny. Like, was that what you went off to do to begin with?
Yeah, God, I mean, I think
it's
now
a big leap from where you are now, isn't it?
Honestly, guys, like, I hate kids. It's the worst thing ever. I hate kids. I hate other people's kids. I don't think I want kids. I don't like kids. So I don't know what I was thinking. But back then, I was terrible at school. I was severely dyslexic. I could always communicate well through speaking, but I was terrible. I couldn't spell, I couldn't read, I couldn't write. I struggled a lot at school. So from a very early age, it was clear that I would be leaving education as soon as I could, which is what I did. So I got very average GCSEs, like passed a few, but just, I mean, let's not talk about them. and then basically at that time, to be fair, I did enjoy looking after other people's kids. I did that a bit for some spare cash. And I thought, okay, well, maybe that's what I could do as a career. And, you know, you find your own way, like I say, in life. And so I went to the local college and did a BTEC National Diploma in Childcare. And I just think it's so random, but I did. And I started, and to get that, you had to do some placements in nurseries. And basically during that time, so from sort of 16 to 18, I was already mad into racing. But in that time, when I had more spare time, I got more and more obsessed with racing. I went racing quite a bit. I was watching a lot of racing on the television. And that was really when I decided, this is mad. Like, I'm not sure I even like the job I'm doing. And I was just thinking, I need to get into racing somehow. And then sort of tried and kicked on from there, basically. But that was definitely the time in my life that the decision was made that I was going down the wrong route with childcare.
But sometimes you have to go down those routes to try them, come to the end and come back again, don't you? Like, it's not, you know, no one's career path is a straight line. There's always kind of little cul-de-sacs and dead ends or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't regret that time, really. Like, I know I laugh about it now, but at the time I was very much a home girl. I wasn't ready to kind of, dare I say, go out into the big wide world. And it wasn't, you know, it was the route I went, and I don't regret it for a moment. I had some great times, and I looked after a great family with 5 kids for 3 years on and off. So yeah, and it was great fun, and I loved it. And, you know, I don't regret it for a moment.
And just backtracking a little bit, you said you were like super getting into racing at that point. Where did your love of racing come from, and how did you start with racing in the very beginning?
Well, so basically through watching it on the television, which is sort of how I got to where I am now, because I fell in love with racing literally through watching it on the television. When we were younger, so Mum, I mentioned, was, you know, rode horses herself. And then when I was born, had pony lessons and was pony mad, like lots of kids, I guess. But literally I was pony mad to the point that when I was sort of 13-ish, the only way I could watch horses on the telly on a weekly basis was to watch racing. So I just watched for the horses. I didn't watch for betting or the competition or the jockeys or the trainers or anything. I literally just tuned in because it was nice to see horses on the telly. And then by watching it every Saturday, it was obviously Channel 4 racing back then, you know, one Saturday to another, you start seeing the same horses running and you start following the stories, and just gradually, it just became, you know, a hobby and then an obsession. And that was how I fell in love with it. And that was how I knew I wanted a career in racing television, because I fell in love with it through watching it on the television. And yeah, so I guess it's only now that I think what a sort of like unique way in it was in the end, I guess. But that it's watching it on the TV, as simple as.
I guess that kind of underlines the importance of having racing on terrestrial television, doesn't it? It gives you that wide audience and the capacity for young people, especially, and older people who love the sport, but particularly young people who might not have any other way in, to be able to switch on the telly on a Saturday afternoon and say, oh yeah, we're on ITV, I can watch some horses. Oh, I love that. I'm going to get into it. And then, like you, for that to become an obsession allows them to consider that as a career in future.
Yeah, definitely a career or ownership or whatever route they might want to go down. You know, it's the biggest, terrestrial TV is the biggest shop that any sport could dream of having. And we are in a very, very lucky position as a sport that we have a quite large amount of time on terrestrial TV week in, week out. We have a big shot window to a much wider audience. And it's something, you know, some people moan about, they think we should have more time, but those people, you know, cricket, loads of other sports would dream of having what we have. And so I'm quite conscious about how important it is to keep it in that main terrestrial shop window.
Definitely. So how did you take your first steps into your career? Because I think a lot of people look at broadcasters like you and Gina and Alice and think, how do I get there? Like, how did you start, and what would you advise about other people wanting to get into the industry as a very first baby step?
So I was in that 16 to 18 stage in my life, probably near 18 at the time, decided, right, horse racing. And I want to talk about horse racing for a living. And it was just as simple as that. And so my mum was very helpful. And at the time it was when, you know, well, Twitter is what it is now, I guess. But back then it was kind of full of blogs and not so much the video content, because people couldn't, you know, weren't doing that quite as much. So it was a lot of written blogs. And although I do struggle with my writing because I am dyslexic, obviously with modern technology, it does help. And so my mum said, you should start writing a blog. So I did. I started writing a blog about racing, and I'd write it whenever I wanted. So sometimes twice a week or sometimes once every 2 weeks. But I was just like, the rule was it has to be something that I was, you know, topic has to be something I was passionate about. So not just churning out anything. And week in, week out, I genuinely, even now, wouldn't really be able to tell you what I wrote about. Just, you know, probably racing week to week. And that was what I started. I just one of those free blog websites. And I went on Twitter, and every time I wrote a blog, again, now thinking about it, it's just like, wow, what was I thinking? But every time I wrote a blog, I would copy and paste the link and I would send it to about 50 people on Twitter, like publicly. So on a public tweet to @NickLuck, please can you read and retweet my blog, @Lydia Hislop, anybody in racing, trainers, but lots of journalists and media types. And I just always asked them to retweet my blog, which I wouldn't even, in a weird way, I don't even think I'd have the balls to do now. I don't think I'd do that now.
I was just thinking that, like, I was just thinking I wouldn't do that now, but when you're 18, you're like, yeah, of course I'll do that. No problem.
Yeah, it's that, you know, youth is a wonderful thing because you don't know what failing is.
Yeah, it's so
and
true.
That is what I was like then. You know, I just didn't think that was, you know, that was controversial, or somebody might not like my blog. I mean, I guess I must have thought that, but I was just confident enough that I asked people to retweet it, and they did. And then what happened was, bizarrely, I read a book on Fred Archer, the jockey, and I just loved it. And I wrote a blog about Fred Archer, and it kind of went, when I say viral, I mean, viral is not the word basically, but it probably got 100 retweets and 500 likes, and it was by far my biggest viewed blog. And then it was at that time that Fred Archer blog just sometimes, I don't know how, hit the right notes. that at the same time, again, it's all just through sort of random luck, I guess, but my mum knew someone who knew someone else who worked at the races, and they got me an interview type of thing for a potential bit of work experience. And when I went down for that interview, the guy who's still my boss now, a chap called Rob Dakin, head of racing, he was like, oh, I read your blog on Fred Archer. And so it was funny because, you know, my blog was probably that Fred Archer blog. I probably wrote 50 other blogs before that, and none of them had got any attraction at all. And then that one blog helped me get my foot in the door. But prior to that, so the blog writing was one thing. And then prior to that, I just banged the door down to get lots of different bits of work experience. So I asked Channel 4 Racing, and they, again, it was through somebody, you know, it's just a completely tedious link, but I got some work experience with Channel 4 Racing, which I absolutely loved. So I came back from that and was like, more so than ever, I know that this is what I want to do. Yeah. I just loved it. I went to the St. Ledger the day William Buick won it on Arctic Cosmos. Yeah. And I just drove home and I just was on cloud nine, and I just
that's quite an amazing experience for work experience, because, you know, often when you go to work experience placements, you're like, oh, got to open the post or like do a bit of answering the phone or whatever. But for Channel 4 to be generous enough to give you that as part of your work experience is an incredible it's a credible nod to your talent and what they thought of you at the time.
Well, I don't think it was actually. I think it was probably more that the friend of a friend of a friend, it was just like, yeah, she can come on that day and follow us around a bit. And I was like, okay. So it just tipped up. And then it didn't feel like anything to do with anything I'd done. It was much more to do with just who I knew, and the fact that somebody was like, as a favor, willing to just take me around for the day, basically. But, you know, I got shown the sort of trucks and behind the scenes, and I was just completely in love with them. And to have fallen in love with the sport, having watched these people broadcast, and then being stood there watching it happen. I remember, yeah, I was just completely enthralled with
blown away. But it definitely, your tenacity there when you're saying like you're beating down the door for work experience, that kind of thing of try and try and try again, and getting into communications and broadcasting in the media is hard, and it's competitive, and lots of people want to do it, and it kind of does emphasize the thing of it being a continual, when you're in the early days of your career, it being this kind of continual graft to get where you want to go.
I was writing that blog, I was asking anybody and everybody with an ear if they'd have me on work experience, like finding a tedious link connection, people my mum knew through the media. Like one of the connections was, you know, my mum knew somebody through ITV who worked at the Daily Mail, who was the floor above the Racing Post, and they stood in the lift with, you know, literally somebody as sort of as tedious as that. And it was just funny how, like, it was all just continuous banging down the door, basically. Sorry, the phone's ringing here. Gonna hope that goes. So yeah, it was just very sort of continuous banging down the door. And again, you know, rejection is part of the course. Loads of people said no. Loads of people didn't reply. Loads of people awkwardly, you know, offered helping hands and then never kind of got back to me. And it was all a bit, you know, then you're like, you keep emailing and you're desperate and nothing ever comes back, and you're then embarrassed, basically. But that was part of the course in hindsight. And yeah, you know, I look back now and I think about all the things that at the time I got really excited about, and then it didn't come off. And at the time it felt like the world ended, that didn't come off, that he promised me this and I never got there or whatever. But actually, of course, it's just a tiny bump in the road on a very, very, very long road. And yet at the time I got completely caught up on it and probably lost sleep over it. But I look back now and I think, Jesus, what was I in such panic about?
So you started off at the races and you went for your internship. Can you just talk us through like what you did for your internship, or what that constituted, if anyone is interested in internships in the industry? What did that do for you, and where did you go after that?
Yeah, so at the time, they actually didn't do internships really. They'd done bits and pieces of work experience, and they had people from Dali Flying Start
Okay.
and a couple of other things, but they didn't officially do a sort of set internship. And then I went and had my meeting with Rob Dakin, and he said, look, we can give you a 3-month internship, but it was in Milton Keynes. So it's pretty unglamorous because they have moved there. Sorry if anybody is that lives in Milton Keynes. Sorry, I love Milton Keynes, love it. But
It's the height of glamour when you've got this like media career in London,
yeah,
all up your sleeve,
it was all about Milton Keynes. But basically, yeah, they had moved their studios. Their old At the Races studios were in London. Then, just for cheaper studio space, they moved to Milton Keynes. And they're just on this industrial estate in Milton Keynes. It's a building where there's sort of Ladbrokes TV and a few other betting shops, like broadcasters basically, and us, and SIS essentially. And yeah, they said, you can do a 3-month internship. We haven't really done one before, but we're prepared to offer this to you. And I think it was all, it was part of the connection I had at the time. It was part of, the blog had obviously for some reason gone down well with Rob at the time. And I'd gone down to London from Yorkshire, like I refer back to that whole commute my parents used to do for the day, for one meeting. And like I was 18 or 19 at the time, and I tipped up, no qualifications, written a blog, and I was like, can I have an internship, please? And Rob was like, okay. Like, got to ask, guys, you got to ask.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he sent me tottering off to Milton Keynes, and I of course had all these ideas of how like wonderful and glamorous this was going to be. And I'm not going to lie to you, it kind of was not what I expected at all. And I moved down for 3 months from Yorkshire, and it was the first time I'd lived away from home, and I was working Monday to Friday in these, like I say, this sort of warehouse in Milton Keynes, driving my Peugeot 106 in and out every day from where I was staying. And because they hadn't had an internship, it was wonderful in a sense, because they didn't really know what to do with me. And so to begin with, it was kind of like, oh, what are we meant to do with this person every day? And then I found a role for myself. So that was one of the things I really learned there is, you've got to carve out, you've got to find what you're good at, and then keep doing that and do less of the stuff you're not so good at, basically. And I was lucky in my internship that was something I was allowed to do. So there was parts and things that I could do, and there was other things that naturally I didn't like doing, or I didn't enjoy, or wasn't that good at. And so it's sort of in that 3-month period, by the end of the 3 months, I got a little niche role for myself. I did, I think, like the daily diary, so like call sheet type thing. I did like the daily inserts, so the form guides, very sort of basic stuff, picked out the form. And I just created this little niche that I enjoyed and kept doing. And then what was funny with it is that my 3 months was up, and sort of the week before my 3-month internship was about to end, I remember someone saying, oh, so you finish on Friday, or you finish next week? And I said, yeah, I'm just going to come in again on Monday. Well, no one said anything, so I'm going to just keep coming in on Monday. And that is literally what I did. Like I remember having the conversation with like one of the bigger bosses, and I was like, well, I'll just keep coming in. And they're just like, what? And Rob wasn't based in Milton Keynes at the time, and he had given me this internship. Like it was, from him in head office. So I think the people out in Milton Keynes were probably a bit like, okay, just keep coming in. So I just came in the following Monday, just rocked on in.
And can I ask, was that internship paid or not, or was it an unpaid internship? Because there's a lot said in the media about the kind of controversies around getting in and being able to afford to get into this industry if you are not able to be supported by your parents or via other means. And how did you find that at the beginning?
Yeah, so it was paid, basically.
Was it?
It was paid. Good. I had my expenses paid for, and then a very low wage, essentially. Okay. So it was, I don't know what the legalities are of an internship, but it was perfect enough to live off where I was living, and I drove in and out every day. And don't get me wrong, I don't think I had 2 pence to rub together at the end of the month, but it was paid. Yeah, I could do it. But it was they put it all through expenses in the end, I think. either way, it was a it was a paid internship. I got,
because it's often talked about as a barrier for people getting into be that any kind of creative industries, really, whether that's film or television or whatever, like that first step with internships, particularly in magazines and things, that, there's often kind of unpaid internships that go along with that. So that's really great to hear. So you just carried on going in on Mondays. I love that.
Yeah, just carried on.
I just love your audacity. Like, you're like, can I have an internship, please? Yes. Okay, I'm just going to keep coming in. Yes. Great.
Yeah, in hindsight, again, it's just such a strange thing, but it was quite like that. And then I kept going in, and so the internship sort of got extended like another month, but it was all it wasn't formal at the time. It was all kind of like, okay, just do another month. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do another month. And then basically after a month, I think I did have a more serious chat with Rob, who was the original chap. And I remember saying, I want to stay. Like, is there any job for me? Is there anything I can do? And at the time, like I say, because I'd sort of got a bit of a niche role going on, and I was ticking off a few things on a daily basis that needed doing in the office, they ended up creating a role for me, which was, again, in hindsight, wonderful. But they created the office assistant role, which they hadn't had previously, and they didn't have after. But they created a role so that, because I was being quite useful, so I think there was a sense of, well, actually, we could do with an office assistant. She could do that. And so I was like, okay, I'll just do that. And so the things I did day to day, I don't really remember there being much of a change. And then what happened, and then I only did that for about 6 months, because then one of the assistant producers left. And then once he left, it was a natural thing for me to apply for that job, because a lot of what I was doing day to day was what the assistant producers would be doing. And so then I got the assistant producer job, and that was kind of when I really, went off the bottom rung of the ladder to the second bottom rung of the ladder.
You went from making the tea to drinking the tea.
Yes, kind of. So
what do you do as an assistant producer? Like, what does that role actually entail? Because I know obviously you've moved into presenting later on, but when you started in production, it's good to have knowledge of what's going on behind the camera, but like, what are you actually doing as an assistant producer?
Yeah, I mean, the whole way along, all of these roles were only so I could get on camera, really. Yeah. I knew the whole way along that was what I wanted to do. Yeah. I still know that's what I want to do now. And so the whole time it was just a way to keep my foot in the door and learn something, but basically while still sort of furrowing a passage to get on screen. But as an assistant producer at the races, your day-to-day job was essentially putting together all the elements of a program that you would watch on Sky Racing now, or at the races back then. So everything from like a form insert, so just me talking about a horse winning last time out and the video of it with the highlight on, researching all the forms, so all those inserts have to be well researched, typing out the straps, it's all very, back then it was quite sort of, none of it was automated. And then the promos and the features, so you would then be creating, putting ideas forward for a feature, often cutting a feature, going out on a shoot maybe, and then bringing the footage back and going through it, and cutting the news for the following day. So any interviews that got done that day on the channel would then be turned around for news the next morning. All those sort of things. So literally as simple as listening to a Richard Hannon interview, picking out the best 1 minute of news, in and out, putting a nice shot on it, and sending it down to be played out on the channel.
That's cool. And when you moved into presenting, Susanna has just popped a question on here actually to say, how much do you plan what you say on TV, and how much is spontaneous?
I think I personally, no, I don't think I know I should be more spontaneous, because one of my biggest hurdles that I'm still trying to get over now, and I probably will be for a very long time, is trying to be more myself on the telly. So talking to you guys now, it's relaxed and you feel very comfortable and you can be yourself. Whereas when you're at Wolverhampton and you're trying to talk about the form of the 5 furlong Class 6 handicap, it's hard for me personally to be myself and be the form guru sort of thing. Trying to get that balance right is very tricky. But in terms of like, you wouldn't prep what you're actually saying. You just prep the facts and the figures that you want to talk about. And so, yeah, you do practice what you're going to say, but it's not scripted. You know, we don't have an auto cue or anything like that. And so it is all pretty natural, I guess, when you think of it like that. You know, I was amazed. So many sports channels still have auto cues in the galleries, auto
Oh,
cues
really?
in the studios. Yeah. And we've never at the races, Sky Sports Racing has never had an auto cue.
Wow.
So none of that sort of stuff is scripted. But if I'm going to do a feature with Paul Nicholls tomorrow, when I drive down in the morning, I'll be thinking what my intro piece to camera is. You know, we're here at Paul Nicholls ahead of the 2021 season, and he's got X, Y, and Z. You know, my line will be relatively prepared, but it's not to the point that it's actually scripted.
Okay. It's like Made in Chelsea. It's kind of like loosely done.
Loosely done. Yeah, loosely done.
And off the back of that, because even working at the race course with the horses, like week in, week out, I have got an awful memory for form. Like I am horrendous. Like I can remember numbers really, really well. I've got terrible memory for horses. And I, for example, would really struggle to name like the winners of big races from years gone by, things like that. How much of that stuff do you hold in your head, or is it all about the kind of meticulous prep? And how much prep do you do before you go to Wolverhampton on a Saturday night, for example?
Again, it's probably all personal. Well, it is. And, you know, another presenter could be sat next to me now and he would say, do an hour's prep and then I'm good to go. I generally can't do anything the day before I'm on course reporting because I know it'll take me a day to prep or Wolverhampton cards. I always over prep. I mean, Alex Hammond's obviously one of the main female reporters in racing, well, presenters in racing, and is our main headline presenter. And she is the same. She's also instilled that into me. She is meticulous with her prep. I mean, you know, the day before any big meeting, she is in the office for days. I mean, literally days. And I'm the same. I block out the day before I'm on course, put it in my diary, can't do anything that day, can't, you know, have anything else in because I'll get up and, you know, walk the dog. But other than that, I'm at my desk. It's a day's working and a day's prep. And it's not that it's tricky. It's not necessarily, there's days where there's the odd day last year, for instance, where if I do back-to-back races, back-to-back race course days, you know, you can only prep the day before the declarations come out. So you can't, and so then you only have the night before to prep the second day. And that used to absolutely terrify me because I think, how can I do it? But it's amazing how when you don't have the time, you actually can do it. But for me, I feel more comfortable if I've completely over prepped. And then when I get onto the course, I mean, of my notes, my cameramen laugh. I have pages of notes and they're like, Vanessa, you don't need it. You could, you know, you can do it with one page of notes. And they're probably right, but it's kind of like a comfort blanket. And of the notes I spend the day before meticulously typing out, I'd say I use 15-20% of the notes I've actually learned and written and looked at. And everything else is just there as this like bizarre safety net. But if I don't have it, it makes me feel more nervous. And if you're nervous, then you can't do a good job. So
but that's really interesting because Anna Marie made that point in the last interview that she is all about meticulous preparation. And she was saying that as a sports person, when she was a rower, you don't go into a race without knowing exactly how it's going to go because of how you've done it in training. And I think that's really interesting that you're saying the same, that that confidence you feel to do your job well comes from being really well prepared, because then you just know that you can go on camera and okay, you might only use 20% of what you've prepped, but you've got everything else there as well. So if you do need to pull it out, you're like, oh yeah, great, I got that bit.
Yeah, I mean, for me, on one of those Channel 4 work experience days, actually, I had breakfast with John Frankham and Alice Down. And at the time, again, this was just like sent from heaven because I'd fallen in love with the sport from watching them. But I remember it so clearly to this day. And I said, well, what would be your advice then? Like, what should I be doing? And Alistair said, well, my piece of advice would be that knowledge is king. Yeah. Knowledge is king. And he backed it up by saying, because when you're broadcasting, you don't use all your knowledge that you've got in your brain or in your notes or whatever it may be, but just having it gives you a sense of security. And then when you have that security, you're just a much better broadcaster, essentially. So his big thing was knowledge is king, and it really, really stuck with me. And yeah, I just think if you're not prepared, I would hate to drive home one day from a day on course, and no day on course goes perfectly. You're live broadcasting, you're in and out of breaks, you're watching live horse racing. It's never perfect. And I go home knowing I can improve on so much stuff, but I would hate to drive home and think I let myself down because I didn't prepare. Like that would just be awful for me. And so, if I've done everything I can, and I've prepared, and I've been meticulous, and I've gone through everything I can do, and then it doesn't go right or something goes wrong, then at least I know I did all I could to do the best I could. I guess that's the thing.
That is totally the thing. And just going back to that about when you're saying that you're constantly trying to improve, you went, I'm just going to plug basically here for the Women in Racing bursary. Vanessa was the recipient of a bursary a couple of years ago where she went to do a presenting course. That's right, isn't it? Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that, what you gained from that, and what your thoughts on the kind of bursary were in terms of how that helped your career?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually huge. And I'm not just saying that as a plug. It was huge because at the time...
I'll pay you later, it's fine.
No, but at the time I had started getting some like very, very early reporting gigs at the races. So I was going out and doing what we call like the news shifts. So it's not live. You'd go out, you'd interview Joe blogs about X horse for 2 minutes. You'd have your questions, you'd read your questions, I'd be off camera. So, and then when you take the footage back to the edit team, this is the very early stages of reporting, your questions are all clipped out. So nobody even knows you're there anyway. And so I was probably at that stage in my career. I was getting out and about quite a bit, but actually I wasn't really broadcasting because I was reporting broadcasting. And I'd done very little at the time, but I was kind of on my way. And it was Susanna Gill, and I think Tallulah maybe at the time, Susanna, who told me I should apply for the bursary and explained it all to me. And it was something I never would have even thought about applying for in the past. But actually, when I read all the information on it, I thought, and I do tick some of these boxes, I'll go for it. And then they paid for not all of, but a majority share of a presenting course that was in London. And it was just brilliant. It was so different to what I'd done previously. It was in 2 days of a course, it was kind of as much as I would have done in almost a year, just plugging on and do it. Because it's just the one, for me, it was just obviously different for every bursary and every course that, they're funded. But for me, it was this one-on-one tuition, and he was brilliant with me. He completely got me from day one, and he was just so helpful in terms of me. I went to a studio in London and I sat there. I did some presenting basically, and we'd watch it back and he'd tell me where I went wrong, what I did well and what I did badly, and where I could improve and how I could improve. And just having that one-on-one tuition, you don't get that in day-to-day life. Like I don't get that now, and I never would have got that then. And just having that was just, I came away, I was just thinking, how on earth would I have known all those tricks of the trade had I not been on this course? It baffled me. It was like opening a whole new door. So it was huge for me. And then because I'd gone on that gave me a bit of, a few people saw that, a few people kept congratulating me for it, and felt like at the time quite a big deal actually. And then as a result, work were like, oh, well done, you did that, and how was that? And I explained what I did, and then that definitely opened up another little door to another opportunity, and then you do that well. And so it was really big actually. And I think even now it's getting, I look back at it and think at the time it felt big, but even now I can see how significant it probably was on my career path.
It's cool, isn't it? I was just going to say, if anyone has any questions, Suze did pop one in the Q&A, but do feel free to put your questions for Vanessa in the Q&A box. I'll attempt to answer as many as we can during the rest of the interview. We've got kind of 15 minutes left. But otherwise, if you're watching this back, do feel free to drop questions on Twitter or on the Women in Racing feeds. We're on Instagram and Twitter as well. Vanessa is massive on Twitter. You can always hit her up. She has paid testament to the fact that she herself has got her career through there. So yeah. I'm sure she'll try and be as helpful as she can to anyone else with any other questions. I was just going to say, what is the sort of best and worst parts of your job? I know the worst part of mine is standing on the side of the all-weather on a cold evening in the wind. What do you kind of say is like the best and the worst of it for you?
The best of it is my live reporting days. That's what I want to do full time at the role I'm currently in. So my job title at the moment is presenter, reporter, features producer. So essentially I do half and half. I do half time presenting and half the time producing features for the channel, so all content for the channel. And I love the presenting. I do the producing to get more of the presenting. That's kind of how I've always viewed it the whole way through. And so the live presenting is what I love. I get a real buzz off it. I find it a real challenge. I still find it a challenge now. I'm not sure anyone doesn't find live presenting for 6 hours at Wolverhampton on an 8-race card when the best horse you've got to talk about is a 55 rated 8-year-old handicapper. I don't think anyone doesn't find that challenging. But I love I love the buzz of the live reporting, and I love the thrill of, I had it the other day, for instance, I was at Wolverhampton because I am still very much the bottom rung of the presenting ladder. And so I get the Wolverhamptons and Lingfields, and I was there and I saw a good horse called Great Gaddian win for Roger Varian. And I got such a kick out of watching it win, analysing it pre and post race, and then discussing it with the jockey afterwards. And that little 20-minute segment is the reason why I do the job. I love seeing a good horse, and I loved explaining to the viewers why it's a good horse, what it did. Very confident in that day that I knew that this was a nice horse, and explaining just quite technically about how the race was written, what he did in the race that makes him a good horse. And when I did that little 20-minute chunk for that race, I just remember thinking, I get a real thrill off that. That was a real kick, because I guess it comes back to what I keep saying, that because I fell in love with racing through the telly, I'd love someone to be sat at home watching me talking about Great Gaddian winning a novice stakes at Wolverhampton one day, and I think, oh, that made that more exciting. I get that now. That's cool. And I'd like someone to be sat there thinking that. That's kind of my aim, really.
That's cool. I love this question from India. Does Vanessa have any superstitions or wear any lucky pants on presenting days?
I do. I'm weirdly superstitious. Lots of people think I'm sort of like super relaxed and not into those sort of things at all. But if I see a magpie, I always have to like tip my hat and say, "Morning, Mr. Magpie, how's life today?" And sometimes I see 7 of them driving along. So I'm just like constantly doing this. Don't have any lucky pants, actually. Not a lucky pants person, but definitely have some superstitions, just like, the magpie one. There's a song, it's so stupid, but there's a song that I remember having a bad day, and I listened to the song and it came on twice on my like shuffle, even though I had 1,000 songs at the time on my playlist.
Oh yeah, I know which song you mean.
On the way to a race course, and then I had a bad day, and I
that means something, doesn't it? I mean, I'm with you.
I was just like, well, that's got to go.
Yeah.
That went off the playlist. So that would be one of my superstitions, but not too many. I'm not like Rafael Nadal or anything with turning his water bottles or anything like that, but a few.
Fair enough. What has been is another question with they're flooding in. Thanks everybody, this is great.
More questions the better. I love some questions.
Okay, and we definitely need some quick fire. I've got a few quick fires, but if anyone else has any, then we can go for those. Which has been Vanessa's favourite day on a race course, on or off screen?
On or off screen? Probably off screen. Actually, on screen, I did a feature at the races where we followed Dennis Hogan. Some of you might have seen it. It was at the back end of 2018. And Dennis Hogan I know him quite well, the trainer in Ireland, and he said that he was going to buy a horse at the July sales at Tattersalls to go to Laytown in September to run on the beach. And he said that you should, I'll let you follow me and do a feature. At the time, it's the sort of feature now we wouldn't get away with, sort of doing at Sky Sports Racing, wouldn't really be their way, I don't think now. But back then, at the races was a lot more it was probably a bit more relaxed, to be honest with you. And they the boss liked the idea and was like, yeah, kick on. So we filmed him buying the horse in July week at Tattersalls. And my opening link was, we're going to follow Dennis Hogan buying a horse to get to the beach later. And who knows, he might end in the winner's enclosure. And so he bought this horse, Cyrus Dallin, for I think 7,000, maybe a bit less, maybe 6,000. And we filmed him buying it. And then we filmed updates in Ireland, because it was at the time when we had the rights to Irish racing. And then we went over to Leytown, and just everything went well. And we filmed him the morning of having his morning gallop at home. And then we followed him in the race to the race course. And Leytown, just this incredible Irish race course on the beach. It's absolutely mental. And
it's bonkers, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyone who gets the opportunity should go. It's so cool. It's like a sort of pop-up fair and a race course up the beach. It's mental. And it was the first time I'd ever been to Leytown, and we were filming this horse, and it only went and won. And it was like all my dreams had come true. And it wasn't just for the feature. It was I'd really got involved with the ownership group and Dennis and the gang, and it was magic, actually. And then, so my opening link 3 months prior had been, who knows, we might end up in the Leytown winners enclosure. And there we were. And it was a gloriously sunny day. And then in terms of off screen, God, maybe it's just the Irish. Maybe I'm obsessed with the Irish. But I've had some great days at Leopardstown. I love their Christmas festival. Just top class racing, the best racing around. Essentially Cheltenham, but just not with the English horses, but Cheltenham at Christmas at Leopardstown. And it's just done. They do it so well. They cater for the real festive feel and the top class racing. And I've had some wonderful days there. Highly recommended. Yeah.
There's something about Irish racing, isn't there, that's just the crack is just unbelievable, isn't it, when you go with friends? And I think they do it brilliantly there with all the kind of hospitality and stuff. And this one I was going to come to, actually, but Tallulah's popped it in. I love talking about failures, because I think anyone who pretends that their career has been without them is a total liar. And I always love chatting to guests and interviewees about mistakes and failures in your career. Have you had any biggies that have given you lessons learned that have shaped your career? I know I can think of millions in my own career.
Oh yeah, I've had some terrific failures. I mean, really top notch. In terms of not actually presenting, but my worst, oh God, I've had some great ones, guys. Absolutely great. So in terms of off screen, producing wise, I was producing at the races, and you have to produce promos and little advertorial things for a race that's coming up or whatever. And I put together a promo for, let's say, Ascot. It wasn't Ascot, but Ascot on Saturday, a little promo piece, put a piece of music on. It was at the time when we had a license to use a lot of commercial music, and there was a track at the time, I couldn't even tell you what it was now, but it'd been on the radio loads, and it was just lovely dancey music, horses cheering, come racing, great. Whacked it together, picked it off. They played it out on the channel. Turns out that I had used the explicit version of the track. And I'm not going to tell you what the chorus was, but it literally could not be any worse. Could not be any worse. As in, imagine the swear word, the worst swear word, the swear word I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
So
good.
The producer calls. I wasn't actually in that day, and he calls me, and I was like, "This is weird. What does he want?" So I answer the phone. Like, yeah, what's up, Vanessa? What the hell? And I was like, oh my God. And luckily, I mean, this is years ago, and I hope it doesn't get me into trouble now. Luckily, it went unnoticed from any authority type people. But obviously, in-house, it went down very badly. So that was that. At the time, I put an explicit swear word on the television, pre-recorded, pre-cut thing. So that was great. And then presenting wise, there was a time when I was on Get In, which is the Friday night Sky Sports Racing All That the Races show, and the horses weren't loading before Dundalk, and the boys, Luke and Jason, were really filling. I mean, and we all have to learn to fill, because often horses don't load, but this was like going on 7, 8, 9 minutes. I mean, we were really running out of things to say. I think there'd been an incident. And the lads always used to take the mickey out of me because I do a terrible Irish accent. So they got me to do the Irish accent live on television. Now, in my defense, they were saying, come on, Vanessa, do the Irish accent, do the Irish accent. I was like, no, it's live on the telly. I was like, no, I don't want to do my Irish accent. And then they said, and I'm going to say what I said, but then they said, go on, do it. So I said, okay, so it's still live. I said, okay, let me just get in the moment. To be sure, the lads, okay, right, potato, 5:15 at Dundalk, da, da, da. And I did this like hilarious, rubbish Irish accent, right? And never thought anything more of it. Those were literally the words I said. You guys are thinking, how can she get in trouble for that? No, an official Ofcom complaint to races because my Irish accent was offensive, like in a racist way. Yeah,
I can believe that.
I was mortified. Now I can fully understand it. But at the time, I was beside myself. And it was very serious because it was an official Ofcom complaint. So my boss had to have me in to talk about it, had to show me what I'd said, flag it up, explain why it was considered offensive. And that was definitely a learning curve. Don't do an accent, ever.
No. And sometimes actually it's a bit, you think you're just having a joke and a laugh, aren't you? And like, you know, you're just messing, having a bit of a joke with the boys, whatever. And actually then you think, oh, God.
Yeah, at the time it was because that show, anyone who watches that show, it's just full of the banter. It's not a serious show, it's just full of the crack and it's full of banter. And, you know, I remember ignorantly thinking at the time, you know, they do accents and stuff on a league of their own, but it's different rules, it's not the same. It doesn't, like, if it's different shows, we're a sporting platform, we're a professional sporting broadcasting platform. And that is where, and so not only did I learn not to do offensive accents live on television, but I also learned how clever Luke and Jason are, as Luke Harvey and Jason Weaver as broadcasters, because there is a incredible talent line that they have managed to reach but not go over, whereby they can be funny and take the mickey out of each other and have a load of banter, but they don't actually receive an Ofcom complaint, which is what I received.
There's time for everyone, Vanessa, don't worry.
There is time. Yeah, that was a career low. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, you learn from all these things, don't you, like you say, and
you do.
You haven't lost your job, you're still working at the races, you're still doing a fantastic job. So I think you just have to just take these things on the chin, don't you, when they come. And I know, like, I've had complaints as a vet before, and some of them I felt were justified and some of them I didn't, but it's kind of, you have to swallow them, and it's really hard early in your career. But I think you kind of get used to criticism and complaint in time. A, because you're not going to please everybody, and B, because some people just love to complain about everything. But it's kind of really interesting to hear that those sort of things happen and sometimes bounce back.
Sometimes you just get it wrong. Just get it wrong. And you know, and once somebody points it out that you got it wrong, like, you're like, crap, I got that really wrong. But that we all get it wrong, all, like, lots day to day we make mistakes in life. And I wouldn't be someone who naturally beats myself up about that sort of thing, because I think I've, you know, surrounded by the right people, and I definitely know that we're not all perfect. You do make mistakes, and it's how you kind of get up from those mistakes that really shapes where you end up.
Definitely. Couple more questions. Jess has actually got 2 questions in here, so we'll tackle them one at a time. Is it competitive within Sky Sports Racing to get opportunities on track?
Yeah, very competitive, and I'd love more, but you know, the roster only has a certain amount of days, and it's very, you know, I'm competing against experienced broadcasters who are on ITV racing. You know, I could be doing a day at Newton Abbot, or Mick Fitzgerald could be doing a day at Newton Abbot. Now, Mick Fitzgerald is a much better broadcaster than me and much more experienced than I am. And so it's very competitive. And even to get the live days, to get on the roster in the first place was just a constant like push, knocking on the door. And now I've got them, I have a set amount a month. Everyone has a set amount a month, kind of, but obviously they can shimmy them around a little bit. And that's the one part of my job I think I could do, well, not one part actually, I could do loads of parts of my job better, but one area personally I would like to be able to sort of deal with better is it's not about what other people are doing. You know, everyone is on their own track, and I'd love more shifts on course in a month, but the opportunity isn't there at the moment, and I'm in a really competitive environment. And so even if there was an opportunity for loads more shifts on course a month, who's to say I would get some of them? Hayley Moore would probably get a load of them. She's brilliant. Gina Bryce, Alex Hammond, you know, and I'm just naming the girls there. It's very, very competitive. I had a conversation with my boss at the start of the year, and I said to him, it's like, I want more days on course. And he's like, well, so does everyone, Vanessa. You know, you've got to get good. And then we, you know, that's the way it works. And so it's kind of hard to hear because, well, it's not hard to hear. It's the way it is. It's not just going to be gifted. You don't just get gifted days on course because you asked for them and you're liked by your boss, or, you know, you've got to actually be good and be proving that you can do it. And so for me, it was like, I came out of that meeting and I was just like, right, I'm going to be better. The only way I'm going to get more days is to be a better broadcaster. So I went away and I watched myself back meticulously, and I'm trying amid COVID to be better, so that he's, you know, you've got to force their hand to give you more days. So they have to give you more because you're getting so good that it's like, well, Vanessa's so good there, we should give her an extra day a month. And definitely, that's how it is.
And the second part, off the back of when you said you were naming the girls, off the back of that, do you see racing presenting as male dominated? There seem to be far more females on Sky Sports Racing, but very few on the other channels.
Yeah, I'm lucky to, obviously now we're in 51% by Sky. You know, we're under the Sky umbrella, and they're a wonderful company to work for in terms of like equal opportunity on sporting platform, on all presenting platforms, but sporting platforms. Sky's theory is there should be 50% women on the telly and 50% men, straight up, just no fluffing around. That's how it should be.
That's so refreshing, isn't it?
Yeah, and being at Sky is very different to any other areas in racing in terms of, you know, I know racing can be backward, and I know lots of people are pushing it forward, and I do think there is a movement happening. But at Sky, it's like, it would be embarrassing for the racing channel not to have a prolific amount of women, because Sky are such sort of straight down the line. If you're good enough, you should have the job, and we shouldn't just be dominated by them. But they've always been like that, Sky. They're very pro women, essentially. And so, yeah, I think it's helped me. I think it's massively helped me, because I'm not sure, you know, when there's such pressure from a wider umbrella on our channel to, you know, put women on screen, only if they deserve the opportunity, I must add. But there is a wider umbrella, you know, pressure from above, and so as a result, it is, you know, it's more available, I guess. It's more, those shifts are more readily available than maybe they would be at other places. I don't know.
Yeah, that's cool. That's very cool. It's good to hear though, and actually, like, it just shows they can do it. They don't make a big deal out of it. It's just done. It's possible for everyone to do that. It just needs to just be done, and then it's fine. You know. And just to finish with, last question. We've got a couple of minutes left. What is your dream in terms of your career ahead and your current career goals? It's a biggie.
Yeah, it is a biggie, but as I am very career driven, think about it all the time. So I know, but my career goals, my current career goals is just what we were talking about, to have more shifts on course, to do more live reporting. And it's just a very tricky sort of catch-22, because we've covered how competitive it is. And so for me to have more opportunities on the telly, I have to be better and competing against those terrestrial TV broadcasters. But they're broadcasting 5 times a week and I get 5 shifts a month. So I'm bottom rung of the ladder. Well, I'm not quite, but you know, I'm down there in the pecking order, and I'm trying to climb up, but with not limited opportunity, but you can see how it's tricky for me. So at the moment, my career goal kind of for the next 12 months is that, obviously because of COVID, my days on course were scrapped to start with, and then have come back very slowly. So the first one is just to get back on track in terms of my actual consistency out on course. And then in terms of my actual broadcasting on course, I want to be delivering something to the viewer that they can't read in the paper every day. So my prep be good enough that I'm trying to tell you something, I'm telling you something that you haven't been able to read in the Racing Post. And I think if I can do that, shift in, shift out, shift in, shift out, eventually people start to hopefully think, she can do this, she's confident, and you know, she's got decent stuff to say, I guess. So that's short term. And then long term is, you know, I want to present live full time. That's what I love. Well, I'm not necessarily, you know, I'm not saying I want to be at every big event, but of course I'd be lying if I didn't say that it's a dream to be broadcasting live at Royal Ascot. That's a huge dream. But day to day, those are the one-off high days. You know, I don't mind if I'm broadcasting at Wolverhampton still, as long as it's tied in with some other big days as well. That's what I want to do full time, live presenting.
Well, that is very cool, and it's a totally attainable goal, because as you said, when you think about your goals all the time, that's how you get there, isn't it? You know, and I for one think you're wonderful. Your warmth and your humor is just there on screen as well, as much as your as we've discussed, meticulous research and wonderful knowledge. So I think you're doing a great job, and you're a big inspiration to girls and women coming behind you as well, Vanessa, so thank you. As I said, this is being recorded. Share it around. It'll be on all the social media channels in the next few days. Thank you very much, Vanessa, for joining us. We are going to be back in October with a couple more of these. We're going to try and do them once a fortnight or once every 3 weeks up until Christmas. We've got another slew of really good guests coming up. I won't give away too much, but there's some good names coming who have got loads of insights to share about their roles in the industry as well. So yeah, do feel free to share this around, and we will see you all soon. Thank you, Vanessa, and good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.